great to see you. We're talking about the perfect Super Bowl ad. Let's start by establishing why it's so hard, and maybe tell us a bit about how you come at this with Neuro-Insight.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's hard, but let's understand why advertising is hard to begin with, right? So the whole point of advertising is for creativity, which in itself is hard. Creativity is defined as using your brain to connect data sets that may not have been previously connected, to create stories, to be able to communicate messages that do one of two things. Either they reinforce brand and its attributes, or it helps you move product. So it has to do one of these two things. Either it helps you in sales or it helps build long-term equity. And the reason why that's hard is that we get lost in the multitude of channels that we have to tell these stories. We get lost in the glitz and the glamour of this industry, but the very basic need of advertising is to tell stories that do one of these two things, and we forget that.
Talk about what Neuro-Insight does, because I think it's really fascinating the way that you come at this.
Sure. So essentially, the past 5,000 years of philosophy and the past 100 years of neuroscience will tell you that 90% of human decision-making takes place in the subconscious. And by definition of the subconscious, it's below your conscious awareness. So no matter how many times I ask you questions, you yourself don't know why you make your decisions the way you do.
All fate. It's just fate.
Yes. So no, it's not just fate. It's a sum total of your subconscious associations that you are not aware of, that you store as you live your life, that come to a certain kind of conclusion when you make a decision without you actively knowing it. So think about the $1 trillion that we spend on new product innovation, marketing, advertising, and strategy every year, essentially are all relying on what we call self-reported data, which correlates into in-market behavior at about a 24% level.
So I want to stop here, because one of the things that's interesting, you're talking about a highly individualized experience, which perhaps, Chat GPT and its ilk, new day, new ads. But the Super Bowl by its very nature is, tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions of people watching the same ad. That would suggest that it's almost doomed from the start.
Not at all. Individuals make individual decisions, but the reason why we're able to scale up decisions at a societal level is because these decision making follow patterns. We are all exposed to culture, society in a certain way, and those things end up influencing our behavior. Otherwise, it wouldn't be true that movements happen in countries and at this point with a highly connected world in the world at the same time. Why is it? Is it one day that all the women woke up in the world and decided that, hey, by the way, we don't have our rights? It's a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
You create stimulus, the myths, the stories, the songs and rituals that drive individual behavior become a societal pattern. So no, the Super Bowl isn't doomed, and that's why it's magical, because 100 million people watch it. So it's an opportunity of a lifetime to create those myths, those stories, those songs and rituals for that scale of people. But to go back to why Neuro-Insight exists and what's our angle, like I said, because most of the decision making in business is relying on self-reported data, it misses out on a larger chunk of how people actively make decisions. So we invented a brain mapping technology called SST to be able to look into the subconscious drivers of motivation. And we stick electrodes on people's heads and figure out what people are likely to do, not as individuals, but at a population level, given the stimulus that they may be witnessing.
So what have you gleaned from that? Let's say I'm a marketer or somebody who's just simply interested in the field, and I'm watching the ads this weekend. What are some of the truths that you can distill in terms of the ingredients that really make something soar?
Sure. So the first thing is I don't know where it came from, but I suspect that some guy sitting on Madison Avenue in the 60s with his feet up on the table and a rather misogynistic attitude probably said something along the lines of like, well, it's emotion that works. And I think ever since then, this entire industry has been chasing emotion. And we never really had the tools to measure it. So it was a fine thing to do, much like chasing God. But at the same time, when we got the tools
equally elusive, perhaps.
It is equally elusive. It was till we didn't have the tools, at least, to measure emotion. But we still don't have the tools to measure God. But we now have the tools to measure emotion, and we find that actually emotion is not the key ingredient to decision making. It could be a driver of decision making, but the only thing that actually is a core driver of decision making in the future, which is the point of most of advertising,
right,
is long-term memory. And unless and until something goes into your subconscious long-term memory, it is not likely to have an impact on your behavior. So now, when we look at Super Bowl advertising, a few things become clear, right? One, the scene is different from the traditional scene where you have to actually really get the buy-in from people into a story before you take them to the point or the conclusion. Here, people are ready, and they're readily watching and anticipating the ads they're going to watch. So you have their attention, and now you have to actually, and they're expecting entertainment. And now you have to create a story that, one, not just delivers on the expectation of the entertainment that they came in for, but has enough of a surprise element in it to actually delight them. Because if it meets their expectations, happiness is a simple formula. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. And if you're just meeting their expectations, you're actually not leaving them happy. So the one key thing to understand is like, how do I use creativity to not just deliver on the quotient of entertainment that they're looking for, but actually do it in a way that actually breaks the mold of what they would be expecting. So that's one.
Okay, so two, surprise factor basically is number one, if you're to sum that up.
Surprise is an important factor.